If you've ever watched the 1997 Seinfeld episode, The Yada Yada, you know George was horrified that his girlfriend was skipping over the important parts of her stories. And Elaine casually dropped the bombshell that she had yada yada'd over sex, because apparently the lobster bisque was the highlight. Now, we're not here to endorse Seinfeld, premarital lobster bisque, or anything else questionable from the 90s, but it is funny how a sitcom turned yada 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 into shorthand for blah blah blah. Little did George Costanza know the original Hebrew word yada actually means to know. And yes, that's the biblical, intimate kind of know. Leave it to Scripture to take a sitcom punchline and flip it into something exceptional. Well, today we're going to be diving into what God really meant when He designed intimacy, not as something boring, predictable, or rushed through like a bad story, but as something deeply connecting, joy-filled, and essential to a thriving marriage. We'll probably laugh a little, we're hopefully going to learn a lot, and talk about why ignoring intimacy or treating it like an optional footnote can leave couples feeling lonely, frustrated, and misunderstood. So whether you're newlyweds, seasoned pros, or somewhere between Song of Solomon and We're Too Tired, this episode is for you. So buckle up, maybe grab some lobster bisque if you're feeling nostalgic, and let's explore how reclaiming God's design for yada can transform connection, communication, and closeness in your marriage. Welcome to Marriage Life and More. This is a podcast about marriage, Bible, and book studies. We interview people with inspiring stories. I'm Daniel Moore, your host. Over here next to me is my beautiful co-host, my wife, Michelle.
Hey, hey.
Thank you guys for joining us this week. If you're not familiar with our show, check out our website at marriagelifeandmore.com for our platforms. Our YouTube and Rumble links are there. We're also on the Christian podcasting app Edify. We're also on your Alexa and Google smart devices. You can also visit us on social on Facebook, Instagram, and X at CT Gap Online. If you're a fan of our show, please subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment on our platforms. Give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. And we thank you for doing that. Also, our new book is out, Marriage as a Mission, Living Out God's Design for Marriage. You can pick up your copy of the paperback, hardback, or ebook at Amazon.com. Also, a 6-session study guide is available for purchase there at Amazon as well. And we also just released our newest book, 42 Days to a Stronger Marriage, a Christ-centered devotional for couples. And that one's also available in all 3 formats on Amazon as well. Or if you like to shop Walmart, Barnes & Noble, or different places, it's actually available at all of them locations also. So just go pick yours up today. And that would be an excellent Christmas present.
It would be.
We're coming up here on Christmas here within this next week. And so go check those out. Do you want to give a little disclaimer? We're going to be starting a multi-episode series here for a few weeks on sexless marriages. So if you do have young children, young ears that are listening, you might not want to listen to this while they're around, because who knows what Michelle and I is going to be talking about.
That is so true.
Over this next 2 to 3 weeks here. It's probably going to be a 3-part episode. So we just wanted to get that out of the way before we get started. So we've been going through our series, Marriage Reset, Roommates to Soulmates in Your Marriage, and this week we're starting a new episode. It's episode 10, The Growing Presence of Sexless Marriages. John and Stacy Eldridge said, "Sex can be such a stark barometer for a marriage." In 1997, the popular NBC sitcom Seinfeld released an episode called The Yada Yada. In the show, George Costanza laments about his girlfriend's use of the phrase yada 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 to shorten her stories and leave out critical details. George ends up consulting Elaine, and they have this interaction. George said, "You don't think she yada yada sex?" Elaine says, "Well, I've yada yada'd sex. Yes, I met this lawyer, went out to dinner, had the lobster bisque, went back to my place, yada, yada, yada. I never heard from him again." Jerry said, "But you yada yada'd over the best part." Elaine said, "No, I mentioned the bisque." So while we're not endorsing Seinfeld or glorifying premarital sex, it's fascinating how the show's use of the phrase yada, yada, yada helped turn the word yada into a cliche.
I'm going to stop you right there. What is a lobster bisque?
I would have to Google that because I think that's above my pay grade.
I'm like, what is a bisque? I'm like, I don't even know. So I was just curious if you knew.
I guess we'll have to go look.
Oh, okay.
I'm not real sure either.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that knows.
Yeah. Usually lobster is market price? Is that what they call it?
Whatever, but
yeah, it's like...
I wonder if it's some kind of soup or something. I don't know.
No.
Just, sorry. Sidetrack.
Unless I'm at Long John Silver's and getting the lobster nuggets or whatever they are.
You don't even eat Long John Silver's.
Well, I don't. That's true. But
we wouldn't even know if they had something there that would be lobster.
Well, they used to have them because we did to get them before there. Don't know if they were real lobster or not, though. So there's no telling.
I'm going to tell you probably not.
Probably not. So, yeah, that's a little bit of my pay scale.
All right.
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
We'll have to go look that up. But back to this, in today's culture, the phrase yada, yada, yada is a disparaging response, indicating that something previously said was predictable, repetitive, or boring. It's the equivalent of sarcastically rolling your eyes and saying, blah, blah, blah. However, God intended to communicate something very different through the Hebrew word yada. In the scriptures, yada means to know, as in sexual intercourse. Sex is important to God. He never meant for yada to mean boring or predictable. After all, the Bible begins with a naked and unashamed married couple living in paradise with the instruction to be fruitful and multiply. So who knew? Naked and unashamed was even pre-thought of way back in biblical days.
Wow.
God gave us this amazing gift so a husband and wife could experience the most profound and deepest level of intimacy and connection possible. One author perfectly describes how sex nurtures such an intimate connection. They said sex brings a closeness that is beyond words. It relaxes you, puts you in tune with each other, and smooths over all the everyday trials and tribulations. Sex is very much the glue in a marriage. You simply cannot get closer than having sex. It consolidates the bond that keeps people together. God intentionally created our bodies with the ability to experience pleasure, making intimacy not only meaningful, but also enjoyable. While many Christian teachings focus on the idea that sex is primarily about giving and serving one's spouse, this perspective can overlook an essential part of God's design. Intimacy within marriage is intended to be mutually satisfying. Otherwise, why would our bodies be equipped with such sensitivity and intricate responses? A man's body is wired to respond intensely during sexual interaction, and a woman's body includes a unique organ, the clitoris, designed solely for pleasure, an intentional aspect of our physical design. So clearly, these features were not by chance. Sexual intimacy was meant to be a joyful and bonding experience for married couples. In fact, God devoted an entire book of the Bible, Song of Solomon, to celebrate desire, physical affection, and shared passion in marriage. For example, Song of Solomon 1:2 says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine," where the word love can be even understood as physical intimacy. That reveals just how highly God values the pleasure and connection that comes through sex. When couples regularly share in satisfying intimacy, a deeper emotional and relational bond forms. Data supports this truth. A Pew Research survey discovered that a happy sex life ranks as the second most significant factor in overall marital happiness, with 70% of the participants saying it's very important to their relationship success. On the flip side, when problems arise in the sexual aspect of marriage, it often causes a ripple effect of disconnection and dissatisfaction. According to over 800,000 people who completed the Focus on Marriage assessment, struggles around sex top the list of marital challenges. One of the most frequent issues is a disparity in desire. This often shows up in complaints like, "I want sex more frequently, but my spouse would be fine with once a month, and that leaves me unfulfilled and discouraged." Though misaligned, sex drives certainly create tension. There's even more pressing concern, the growing presence of sexless marriages. This widespread issue is eroding intimacy and weakening relationships all over the world. So as we get started here this week, as we are talking about this roommate to soulmate situation, we know that sex is really, a big part of that a lot of times. And a lot of times it does seem like one spouse is different than the other, and where one may want it more than the other, or it just seems like sometimes they just don't seem to mesh,
I think every marriage probably has that at some point.
Yeah, and I don't know. I know
when experiences it at some point, and some may not.
Yeah, and of course, if you get married the way you're supposed to, and you date and court and whatever, and you don't have premarital sex, like biblically, we're not supposed to be getting involved in that. There's a lot of times that couples won't really figure that out until they do get married, and so that's something that they do have to navigate their way through. And so, as we was reading some of this here at the very beginning. From your aspect of it, that part there where that author was talking about how that sex is in a relationship between a couple, it says that, sex brings a closeness that is beyond words. It relaxes you, puts you in tune with each other. From a female's aspect of that, what's your opinion of what was said there? Do you agree with that from a female aspect? How does that, as a female, how do you guys look at that?
Well, I think, first of all, most females have different personalities. So I think it can't be just specifically from a female perspective, because I think, people have gone through different things in life that they may be a female and sex turns them off because of what's happened to them. Or it could be the fact that they just don't enjoy it. But I think from a female perspective in a marriage, most of us women do enjoy it. I think it is a intimacy that you can't get any closer than that. And let's just get down to the basics. Most of the time you're naked. Yeah. So you're skin on skin. So it is a closeness that you're not going to feel during the day or anything like that. And if you hold hands, you're skin on skin. But when you are completely naked and you are becoming one in having sex, you're giving what you have to give, and you're giving a part of you that you have to give. It's a surrender. Yeah. And so it's a feeling that you cannot even explain.
So from a bonding aspect, do you feel like that, does the sex really enhance the bonding
I think so.
Side of the relationship?
I think so. To me, there's so much to explore too. And you trust that person. You're giving them if you think about it, you're both very vulnerable at that moment. It's not like, first of all, some of us women have a million things like, what is he going to think of my body? What am I supposed to do if, especially it's your first time or whatever? There's multiple things going through your head. And as you've been married for a while, like we have been and everything like that, you just let, everything just go. And, bonding to me, when you are having sex, is probably 100% bonding because you're giving everything you have to that person, and you trust them in that vulnerable time, in that moment.
And I think the important word there was vulnerability.
Yeah.
That does it. If you're going to allow yourself to be in that situation where it actually is going to mean something, because we do know that there's a difference between having sex in marriage versus just trying to get your fix, with just somebody. Yeah. It's not, quote unquote, not going to mean nothing. There's a complete difference in that. But I still feel like a lot of times, even when it doesn't mean nothing, you're still giving away a very intimate part of you.
Oh, absolutely.
That I think still creates a bond. A lot of times people like to say, well, it's just casual sex. It means nothing. But in all reality, I don't see how anybody could ever do that and it really mean nothing, because you're bearing your very intimate being of who you are and the vulnerability that you're allowing to take place at that moment,
Well, I think
you're
not only
giving a
that,
huge part of yourself away.
when you say it's physically, it's mentally too.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, if you really think about it, you're mentally connected to that person then.
Yeah,
you know?
because even mentally, if you can't get yourself into the mood to begin with, it's not going to happen. Or if it does happen, one's going to enjoy it, the other's not.
Right.
You know, you have a lot of issues going on there. So there's a big, huge connection factor just throughout the whole aspect of the whole thing.
And the question you had was, you know, you were talking about bonding and from a female's perspective. You know, if you're truly in love with your spouse, that's something that you really want. How do I want to phrase this? I think if you are in love with your spouse and it's something that you feel like, I mean, to be vulnerable like that connection of not only the being vulnerable, but you're actually showing your love for that person as well. Yep. So it's a loving thing that you're doing as well.
Yeah.
Does that come across right?
Yeah, and we all know that male and female, either way, we have needs. And so we have to be willing, especially as spouses, to fulfill those needs and make sure that those are taken care of. And I know later on in these episodes here with this particular series of episodes we'll be going through here with episode 10, we'll probably get into it a little bit later. And we've actually talked about this before. There are certain times in life that things happen that does create an issue where spouses can't really have the same physical sex like they could before. You and I have talked about that because of our situation, and we'll get into that later on. But one thing that I wanted to mention here as we started it out this way is whenever that sexual relationship fades and it gets to the point where neither spouse seems to be interested in that anymore, or maybe one spouse isn't interested, but the other one still has a major drive going on, I think because of the way that sex has been created, and one thing I want to throw in here as well, when we look at just sex in general, a lot of times, you know, the world has mainly tainted sex and what it truly is with the pornography industry, just the prostitution, all of the things that takes place. We know that one of the major sins that Satan likes to go after is he likes to go after us sexually. That's one of the biggest temptations, probably, especially with guys. There's a huge temptation factor there. And with women, it's starting to grow because we have a lot of women that are involved in pornography now as well. Those numbers have raised considerably. But on the prostitution side of things, you'll really see a lot of men that are involved in that, with the women selling themselves to take care of the men because it's just a big thing. Satan utilizes that, and he knows that if he can get his foot in that door, then he can control you. He can basically, you know, put you in situations where you're going to consistently fail. And he has dumbed that down to where sex is just a feeling. You know, sex is to get my fix. It's like coming off of a high. It's like a drug. You know, you're so, the addiction is there and you want it so bad, you're willing to get it however you can. And then those endorphins and all that stuff happens. You have that release, and that takes care of you for a while until you go through that same cycle again. But when God created sex, he actually, this was a very intimate thing.
Yeah.
And that intimacy that he wants with us is that same type of intimacy that he allows husbands and wives to have between each other. And Julie Slattery, she has a podcast called Java with Jen. She's real big into the sex side of things from a Christian perspective. And I recently just finished a book of hers that she has written here recently, and she's got many more books on that type of subjects as well. But one thing that she kept talking about that really kind of rung home with me that I hadn't really thought of it before is that God is just as involved sexually with us in our relationship as we should be between each other.
Yeah.
The intimacy that God wants us to have, that is actually, that shows up in our relationship with our sexual encounters we have between each other. That is something that is supposed to be kept between the two of us. And that is something that helps our relationship to grow. That's something that, with you, the more intimate that I get with you, the more I love you. And I'm, sure vice versa. That's the way that works for you as well. And so whenever we lose that part of our marriage, then you can kind of see why now we start drifting apart.
Yeah.
Because I think you had mentioned even that glue that kind of holds us together. That's one of the big pieces of that glue that we have between the two of us as a husband and a wife. And if we sever that, that's really the most intimate moments that we can have as a couple is when we're involved sexually. And when we cut that off, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to have one spouse that's really going to miss that.
Yeah.
And they're going to have a strong desire. And then you're going to start seeing the issues where that spouse that has the super strong desire may start wavering off to the side, start looking for it elsewhere because they start having that longing inside of them that their spouse isn't fulfilling anymore. And then you start seeing, instances where the affairs have a chance of happening.
Or the pornography.
The pornography the prostitution. You'll start seeing a lot of that stuff start happening within that relationship, possibly because that hunger is there and that longing is there. And at that moment, the two spouses are not fulfilling those needs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of factors that goes into why that happens. And so one of the big things that happens whenever we become roommates in a relationship, this is probably one of the first big things that goes out the door, is our sex life has a tendency to either stop and be non-existent or very rarely happens.
Yeah.
And even when it does happen, a lot of times there's probably some issue there where it's never the same as it was before. It's like you're trying to do that kind of thing, but you're not really in the headspace. There's just a lot of stuff going on. And, it creates huge issues in marriages. And so as we talk about the sexless marriage, won't you go ahead and share with us a little bit there?
A marriage without regular sexual connection can take many forms, and each couple's experience of this void is uniquely painful. Consider how these 4 different couples describe the emotional weight of intimacy that has faded. Mike feels anxious as he crawls into bed. He notices the soft music his wife turned on and the scented lotion she applied. Familiar cues that she may be in the mood for connection. Instead of responding, he turns away and pretends to be asleep. Deep down, Mike isn't uninterested. He's simply overwhelmed by a growing sense of failure when he tries, but doesn't feel emotionally present. He doesn't want to hurt his wife, but he's paralyzed by the fear of disappointing her again. Katie used to enjoy intimacy with her husband, but now, between managing her career as an event planner, raising young children, running errands, and balancing responsibilities at church, her desire has taken a back seat. By the time she hits the bed, her body begs for rest and not romance. Her husband feels the distance, but every advance is met with a tired deflection. Maybe later, or not tonight. Katie feels a quiet guilt growing inside her, knowing she loves her husband, but struggling to find the capacity to express that love physically. Tony, at 46, wrestles with sudden change in his body that he never expected. Running a successful business gives him confidence, but when it comes to physical intimacy, he feels insecure and even humiliated. After decades of normal sexual experience, his recent difficulty of maintaining an erection leaves him avoiding sex. When his wife initiates, he tenses, uncertain of what his body will do. Rather than confronting the problem, he turns over with a weak excuse and avoids eye contact. His wife, confused and emotionally bruised, lies next to him wondering what she's done wrong. For Melissa, something shifted deeply and emotionally on her daughter's 9th birthday. Before then, she would have called her sex life normal. But that day triggered memories that she had buried, personal trauma that had resurfaced unexpectedly. Physical closeness with her husband now feels unbearable. Unable to explain what she's going through, she creates emotional walls. Her husband senses the drastic change, but is left confused and hurt and unaware of the storm brewing within his wife. These stories reflect a much larger reality faced by couples across cultures and demographics. Marriages that suffer from low or non-existent sexual intimacy. Although definitions vary, experts often describe a sexless marriage as one where intercourse happens fewer than 10 times a year. Research indicates that roughly 15 to 20% of married couples fall into this category. And to the contrary, to stereotypes, it's not always the wife saying no. One study discovered that in about 60% of sexually inactive marriages, it was the man who turned down the intimacy.
And so as we look at these different scenarios here, these are all different types of stories.
Yes.
I mean, it shows that it's not really in particular just one thing that you could possibly fight when it comes to having these issues.
And they were really good stories too.
And, sometimes when this stuff happens, it is for a life-changing reason. Like the man that got older. That is kind of a common occurrence for men as they do get older, that their bodies do start changing, and the effects that the intimacy, the foreplay, the different things that used to happen when they were younger, those effects aren't the same as what he may still really wish it could happen, but his body's not letting it happen. So there's times when stuff like that does take place, and it can happen with women the same way as they go through the changes in their life, the natural changes in their bodies can cause that as well. And so through each of these different stories here, you've got someone that's just super busy, so they're exhausted when they go to bed at night. And I know, you and I have been at that place before. I mean, with our jobs that we have and all the things that goes on in a daytime, we can't wait till our head hits the pillow, and we're just ready to go to sleep at that point. The last thing you want to think about is having to exert a whole bunch more energy. And it seems like, too, the longer you're married, that it's kind of easier to allow that to happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The longer that it goes.
It's a different kind of sex, to be honest, from the time you get married at a young age versus the age we are.
Yeah.
It's just, it means something totally different to me.
Well, for one thing, you have to be more intentional because when you first get married, especially if you waited till you were married before you actually allowed that to happen, you've been living with this anticipation throughout your teenage years, just waiting for that day. And then when it finally comes, you just want to experiment with everything.
Yeah.
You just want to do whatever and just enjoy the moments. And there's always something new, it seems like. But when 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, as it drags on, and you stay together and it goes longer and longer and longer, in order for you to stay connected that way and to make sure that intimacy still is there and that want to have that yada, yada, yada that we were talking about at the beginning, it has to be an intentional thing at that point. That's just something like we were talking earlier where it becomes the glue to keeping your relationship together.
Yeah.
That becomes the one intimate moment that you have that you realize at some point in time in your marriage, you realize that this is a heart thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it.
This is something that truly means the world between the two of us. And the fact that we can be married 20 years to 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, however long it may be, and still want to do that between each other, then I think that speaks volumes for where your relationship is at that point. And I think it tells each spouse how you truly feel about each other if you're able to make that happen. And so as everybody that's listening, you may be finding yourself maybe in a spot like this if you've been married for a while. This does happen, though, to couples that are newly married as well, because if there's conflict and a lot of things going on, then that becomes a turnoff. You don't want to, and we know we work with couples and know couples that, sleep in different rooms. They can't even sleep in the same room with each other anymore. And that it happens in the church and out of the church. It's no respecter of person.
That's right.
And whenever you get into those situations and you let that drag on to where the years go by and you continue to live that way, I'm sure it gets to a point probably where you wonder, is there anything that can fix this? Or is divorce just the only answer? I think a lot of couples probably toy with that. And that's a very dangerous place to be in all reality. Go ahead and take off from there.
Yeah. A significant number of people seem indifferent to sex altogether. Studies show that somewhere between 20 to 30% of men and 30 to 50% of women report minimal or no sexual desire. These dynamics reveal some common indicators of a sexless marriage. And I'm going to give these examples. I can't remember the last time we had sex. Sex feels like a chore or a duty. Or we hardly have time for sex. I love this next one. Sleep is more important than sex. We are great parents, but lousy lovers. Sex happens only if it's scheduled on the calendar. Foreplay is a distant memory. We no longer kiss passionately. I keep getting rejected, so I stop initiating sex. It's easier to masturbate than to have sex with my spouse. I don't feel close after making love. We never talk about sex or share our sexual desires. We've lost a sense of spontaneity and adventure in our lovemaking. I feel like the only one who shows any interest in having sex. Our lovemaking is boring. We aren't playful in the bedroom anymore. My spouse seems more interested in the TV or the cell phone than in having sex with me. My spouse regularly looks at porn. I'm too resentful from working full-time and then doing the majority of housework and childcare to have sex. The Bible is used to pressure me into having sex.
That's quite a list.
I just kept going. I'm like, oh my goodness. And there's probably more.
I'm sure there is. But, there's, me and you have both been married before. And so as we're reading through this list, there's things that I see here that I remember thinking in my previous marriage.
Yeah.
And then there's been times in our marriage now where we've had some of these same comments that we probably could have made to each other.
Yep.
And there's times now even where, some of those like the being tired,
I was like, that has to be the sleep. I'm like, okay, that's me. I admit it. Like,
Yeah, there's...
lay the head down and I'm out. I'm over there snoring.
Yeah. There's situations that happen sometimes in life, that just these things come up. And I found it interesting up there that where it showed the percentages that somewhere between 20 to 30% of men and 30 to 50% of women report minimal or no sexual desire. And honestly, I do agree with that because typically the women, if there is a spouse that's probably going to show a less interest in the sexual desire, it would probably be the female probably a lot more times than the men. The men are just kind of wired a little bit differently.
But why do you think why it's higher for the female?
Well, the men, if just traditionally, I've always known men to just have a higher sex drive. They're the ones that like to talk about it in the little guy group circle with the jokes and all this kind of thing. It's just always been that way. Guys they just have this desire inside of them sexually that's how they like to be taken care of. And where women are more on the intimate side of, a lot of women are fine just being cuddling or hugging or just sitting and watching a movie. It's guys seem to have, and you'll see this joke a lot, guys just have sex on the brain all the time.
Well, and I think to that too, you didn't mention this, but I'm going to mention it. Women seem to be busier than men. As in like, hey, you got supper to cook. You got to clean it up. You got children to take. You got to get their baths. You got to get their bags ready for school. They're exhausted by the time they go to bed. And it's more women than it is men because I feel like the mom plays more roles.
Especially if the man doesn't help.
But I do feel like the women do probably have more on their plate if the man doesn't help. And that would result to, I'm too tired. And, you know, I mean, there's multiple things.
Yeah.
I mean, in here.
Yeah. And it's
because I think if you don't have your house taken care of in that area and the man's not helping, why would you go to the bedroom?
Yeah.
In a female's mind, why would I give you that time if you're not willing to help me get these things taken care of?
Yeah.
And that's that emotional connection.
Yeah. And even some of these, like, you know, where they're talking about it's boring and it's, you know, they're not playful in the bedroom anymore. There's things that you do when you first get married that does seem to kind of fizzle out as you go along and get more years under your belt.
You don't need any of that anymore.
You know, it does change a lot. And so it's just kind of interesting reading through all of that and just seeing how things can transition from one thing to the next. And of course, there's the bad stuff with the porn and all that kind of thing that really creates a huge issue. And you don't want that to be involved, you know, at all in the marriage relationship.
I know one of the things that I like a lot is, you know, the kissing passionately. That is something I feel like it is, and some people don't like kissing, so whatever. But my preference is, you know, yes, once in a great while, it's good to do that. Not just like the little peck that you give them, but, you know, to kiss passionately, because I do think that it turns a female on.
Yeah, there's just a lot of things between the two of you that, especially if you've been married for a while, you should know what those doorknobs are, where you can open up those moments and know what it takes to get your wife going or get your husband going. And those are the things that you need to nurture as time goes along. We're getting close here to wrap up the first part here of this episode. So go ahead and finish up there.
What leads to a noticeable drop in sexual activity within a marriage? One of the most common culprits is parenthood. As I was talking about earlier, children, while a tremendous blessing, can significantly alter the rhythm of the couple's intimacy. In the early months after a baby is born, sheer exhaustion often drowns a sexual desire. Moms may struggle with a body image or feeling desirable while navigating the demands of breastfeeding and constant caretaking. Meanwhile, dads can feel sidelined as their partner redirects her focus and affection toward the child. As kids grow, the demands don't necessarily lessen, they just change. Between shuttling them to soccer games, piano lessons, tutoring, or play rehearsals, couples can find their schedules so packed that carving out time for intimacy becomes a low priority. To make matters worse, some parents co-sleep with their children or allow little ones in their bed, making privacy feel nearly impossible. These factors don't necessarily kill desire, but they definitely limit opportunities, and over time, that takes its toll. That said, children aren't the only reason passion fizzles. Research published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior shows that American married couples reported having sex about 16 fewer times annually during 2010 and 2014, compared to 2000 and 2004. What's behind this trend? Experts suggest that growing stress levels, longer workdays, and increasing parenting demands are major contributors. In fact, the term DINS, dual income, no sex, was coined to describe couples overwhelmed by work and family life with no energy left for physical connection. All of this is compounded by the lure of digital entertainment. Streaming platforms like Netflix, YouTube, and endless social media scrolling compete heavily with opportunities for couple time. Sadly, sex often loses to screens. We'll get into the specific causes a little bit later, but for now, let's look at how a sexless marriage truly affects emotional and relational health.
Okay. And so what we're going to do is next week when we come back, we will pick this back up and we will start looking at that. We're going to start with looking at the impact of a sexless marriage. I think one thing that we need to realize, as we go through this, I know there are some couples that you talk to sometimes, and they don't seem to have the sexual intimacy going on in their relationship anymore. And I think one thing that saddens me is when I see a couple like that, and when they'll stand there and tell you that, well, it doesn't matter. I just don't need that anymore. It's fine. I don't care, whatever. And, that's an important part of the relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think that whenever it gets to that point, where it doesn't happen and you just don't care. And that's why even if you look at this with a lot of marriage ministries, they'll talk about the fact that if you're allowing this to take place, you're not really living in the marital life that God actually created from the very beginning, the way that he wanted you to function as a couple. Sex is a very important part of that intimacy side of the relationship that God created for us, because when we can be intimate with each other and we can show each other that we love each other the way that Christ wants us to and the way that he loves us, that also builds the intimacy and the relationship we have with him.
Oh, that's good.
And so we have to be really careful as Christian couples. Of course, the worldly couples could care less about this part, but as Christian couples, if we truly want to live in the way that God has created us to as spouses, this is a very important part of what God has created for us.
Yeah.
And when we partake in these moments of being intimate with each other, then that reflects that intimacy also that we have with Christ. And you're going to notice that your relationship's going to build on that side of it as well. So when we come back, we're going to pick this back up. And as we mentioned here at the beginning, we know for sure this will probably be at least 3 episodes. It
could be 4.
Could be 4 parts on this one. It's 1 episode, but we're going to break it up because there's a lot here. And this is a very important part of the roommate discussion.
Yes.
Because as soon as you start losing the intimacy and the sex in the relationship, you're down a dangerous slope at that point.
Yeah.
You're probably sliding to being that roommate instead of that soulmate. And so we want to make sure that we don't miss anything here throughout this episode. So is there anything that you want to add to today at all? Okay. Well, we'll be back here in a couple of weeks. We actually have a special episode that we're going to do on Christmas Day, as long as Michelle and I can get it put together. So we're working on that right at the moment. But it'll just be a little short animated type of story that we're going to share. Everybody's going to be super busy, and we don't want to try to throw a full-blown episode out there that
on Christmas Day.
On Christmas Day that you're going to be too busy to listen to necessarily, and we want to make sure we do it justice. So we'll have a special episode on Christmas Day.
Looking forward to it.
And then we'll come back the week after that and continue this series here on the sexless marriage. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up then with that. And we just want to remind you that if you'd like to reach out to us, you can go to our website, connectingthegap.net. There's ways there that you can reach out and contact us or through social media. But as we go, we just pray that your marriage is stronger and your walk with God is closer after this episode. This is an extension of Connecting the Gap Ministries, and we pray that you have a blessed week.